Well, during a long interview I had with Mr. Johnson at the LBJ Ranch in September 1969, we talked about the Kennedy assassination. A portion of the interview was not broadcast at the president's request on the grounds, he said, of national security. I asked Mr. Johnson then whether he was satisfied there was no international conspiracy in his assassination.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
You mean you still feel that there might have been?
Well, I have not completely discounted.
Well, that would seem to indicate that you don't have full confidence in the Warren Commission report.
No, I think the Warren Commission study, and I think, first of all, is composed of the ablest, most judicious, bipartisan men in this country. Second, I think they had only one objective, and that was the truth. Third, I think they were competent and did the best they could. But I don't think that they or me or anyone else is always absolutely sure of every thing that might have motivated Oswald or others that could have been involved.
Only a few weeks ago, a Harris poll revealed that 7 out of 10 Americans are convinced that there remain many important unanswered questions, that the whole truth has not been told. A Gallup poll shows more than 6 of every 10 Americans question that there was a lone assassin.
I don't think that all the facts were brought out. I think something was held back.
I think there were more involved in it than just Oswald.
The only thing that disturbs me is the fact that they've sealed away some of the evidence, and I think that's rather disturbing to most people.
I don't know how in the world they could ever reach a conclusion that one person assassinated him. This is ridiculous. I saw the whole thing on television. I just happened to be home at that time. And I don't think that Oswald, I think that he was working for the CIA.
In 1965, a series of books were written criticizing the Warren Commission's conclusion. In 1966, a film was produced by Emile D'Antonio, a Harvard classmate of John F. Kennedy. Entitled Rush to Judgment, it provides an argument for the defense of Lee Harvey Oswald. But it was in 1967 that the Kennedy assassination was back in the headlines, when a New Orleans district attorney named Jim Garrison charged businessman Clay Shaw with the murder.
We know what cities were involved. We know how it was done in the essential respects. We know the key individuals involved, and we're in the process of developing evidence now. I thought I made that clear days ago.
Although the Garrison trial ended in confusion and ridicule, it did result in one thing that made the public sit up and take notice: a bootleg release of the Zapruder film.
Jim Garrison subpoenaed a copy for the New Orleans trial. It was immediately duplicated as soon as it reached his office and went out to the critical community. Then they took Dan Rather's radio narration and put that in as a soundtrack.
The second shot hit President Kennedy, and there was no doubt there. His head went forward with considerable violence. His head went forward with considerable violence. Forward with considerable violence. Forward.
And so this is how it entered the critical community, through this one format, and went to college campuses. And I would guess conservatively, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of college students saw it. And when in the anti-war demonstrations, they would show that. And when CBS would appear, they would yell out to them, "Forward at considerable speed," showing that they knew that if they lied about the murder of President Kennedy, they'd lie about the war.
It would take 8 more years for the federal government to get involved in the controversy. When they did, it was in response to a series of explosive newspaper reports.
The text of the Cuban report refers to the inquiries of the Rockefeller Commission and also the Church Committee, and mentions as very significant the information published by columnist Jack Anderson about various plots involving gangster John Roselli. In most cases, the evidence involves schemes to assassinate Prime Minister Castro.
I wrote a series of articles about what I learned from Johnny Roselli, what I had double-checked that Johnny Roselli had told me. Basically, it's the toughest story I ever broke, because I had to get my information from two of the tightest organizations in America, the Mafia and the CIA. In time, I was able to get Mafia people to talk to me. In time, I was able to get CIA agents to talk to me, and they confirmed the story. And so I wrote about the CIA recruiting Mafia mobsters to attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Do you think that this new information, not available to the Warren Commission, in itself suggests a need to reopen that part of the investigation of President Kennedy's assassination?
Yes, I do.
A series of investigations were immediately conducted at the highest levels of government into the activities of the CIA. The most famous of these were a series of congressional hearings chaired by Idaho Senator Frank Church.
I got a telephone call from Frank Church, the late senator from Idaho. He was astonished at the stories. He says, "Can you back those stories up?" I said, "My sources are good, but you can do it better than I can because you got subpoena power." And so he used his subpoena power, and with that subpoena power was able to back up the stories.
Good evening. The bad news on assassination plots was reported today by the Senate Intelligence Committee. The committee issued a report which says that officials of the United States government initiated plots to kill 2 foreign leaders, were involved in plots to kill 2 others, were implicated in another, and that the CIA was aware of 2 more murder schemes.
It was learned through Church's committee that well over 20 assassination attempts were made against Fidel Castro, and one was in place on the day that Kennedy died.
Yes, sir.
It involved a high-level Cuban official named Rolando Cubella.
This fellow, Rolando Cubella, who had been in touch with us in earlier days for other reasons, even at the time of the Bay of Pigs, came up with the idea that he wanted to lead a military coup against Castro. And from our point of view, that's great. We were looking for political action, and what became called, his cryptonym we gave him was Amlash, and the AM was the digraph in those days. And it was basically to help him work a military coup.